This is I, the artist, the creative, conscious being.
My dad was a photographer in his spare time, and he gave me some of his equipment, and he kind of inspired me to take up the camera. And I began to start taking photographs of empty parks, empty benches, without people, without characters in there. It was an empty frame, and I wasn't in that frame because I didn't exist in this world. So I had to create a new world for myself, a new dimension that I could fit into. I'd always been a daydreamer ever since I was in school. And when my teachers used to send my green card to my mum, they used to make notes and say, "Graham daydreams in class all day." And I used to feel that was a kind of a hindrance, but I kind of painted it as a win. I was a chubby guy in my teens, but I was lucky enough to get work at Sealink on a permanent contract, which lasted over 12 to 15 years. And I was very well paid for this. And I used to remember on Tuesday evenings in a rainy, cold Holyhead night, I would be out with my friends Graham and Ken drinking and having a few drinks because no one else could. The unemployment was rife. It was the 80s, and basically we were the rich kids on the block. In the early 80s, my dad passed away, and my mum, needed to look after Gaynor and Brian, and I took responsibility for that, to send them to college, to see them through school. I felt I needed to take more responsibility than go out and find myself girlfriends. So I kept myself kind of chubby, cut my hair short, and really refrained from socialising with the opposite sex. But that changed one night when Ken and I sat down and watched a film called Jeremiah Johnson with Robert Redford, and I saw this character step away from what he was living through, was the American Civil War. And he became a private person living off the land, living in nature. And this idea really appealed to me because my father had once missed a ship in Chicago and had gone to work in Yellowstone Park as a ranger during the winter months, clearing snow, releasing animals from traps. Kind of living like Jeremiah Johnson. And I certainly wanted to be my dad again through Jeremiah Johnson. So I began to lose weight. I became addicted to running, weight training, doing martial arts. And over time, I became slim and suddenly blossomed into what most people do when they lose weight. And then I was able to portray these characters on the screen, on my screen. So when I started taking photographs with my brother John, Graham Hughes, Stuart Smith and Paul Martin, I invented these new worlds where I was Indiana Jones or I was James Dean in the oil fields of Texas. And I would go on to different adventures and create these worlds through props, through locations, through building sets. When you looked at the photograph, you didn't see Graham, the person who was working on the sealing ships, who was waking up every morning, shaving his face, serving food in the restaurant or working in the galley. You saw this adventurer on an exciting mission, an exciting journey to find something, to fulfill a need, to find his treasure in the middle of a war film or trying to save somebody or rescue somebody as a hero. One of the things I remember was I was invited to a photographic exhibition in Holyhead, and I took my Dalo boards, which I mounted my photographs on. And when everyone looked at it, they just stood there with their mouths agape, looking at these photographs of this character who was standing next to them. He's just a photographer, they would say. And suddenly they were seeing this different person who was being a storyteller, through the images, the narrative of photographs. And I got quite a lot of applause and kudos for it. And it brought me to the feeling that this is the way forward. I want more of this. There was a chap called Bryn who had a shop in Holyhead, and he used to sell cheesecloth jeans. He and I used to do karate together at the same time, and he looked at some of the photographs one night that I was taking and asked if I would promote some ideas in his shop. So I began to take interest and started taking photographs. Went on a sunny day to a cornfield where my brother took these photographs, and I dressed up as James Dean or as the Marlboro Man, and these went into the dressing rooms in the shop in Holyhead. I really enjoyed the experience. I now began to express myself again as a human being, finding myself through art, photography, martial arts, philosophy, and I wanted to begin to explore these avenues. Both my grandfathers were merchant seamen, but one was in the Ascension Islands, the other down in Nova Scotia. I look at a film, I look at something like Shackleton or Scott to the Antarctic, and then I have this idea of taking a photograph of me as an adventurer. And what I'm doing is I'm not the hero myself. I'm kind of reflecting on my grandfather's journey, what he may have seen. And I replay all those memories that I've heard from my mother's stories about my grandfather. And that I can go on a journey for hours just thinking about what that person is looking at when he's looking off screen. They're looking at an adventure, they're looking at some new horizon that hasn't been touched, the undiscovered life of a mariner or a soldier or in a western, and that's kind of why I do this, is because it fulfills this kind of schoolboy childhood dream of being an adventurer, and I'm not in reality. Once I'd completed taking photographs, I felt I'd achieved what I could do within a time frame. Changed direction basically, and I started to explore my drawing skills and turn that into painting, art, which I'd done many years earlier. And I started to incorporate watercolours, gouache and oils on plates and canvas, trying different aspects of the medium. When I left the ships in 1991, I enrolled in art school in Coleg Menai, and that was basically my determination, my goal to become a fine artist, an illustrator. I worked hard, very hard, during the first what was called a foundation year in art school, and I went for my exam, and they said, basically, Graham, you're not going to be a fine artist or an illustrator, you're going to be a filmmaker, because all the work that you put, the drawings and the illustrations and all the designs you do, you seem to box them into frames, containing them into some kind of format. I'd always been curious about filmmaking, and now suddenly I was going to film school where photography, film and art would blend, merge into one medium. I think my imagination is probably the most effective. It's kind of updated practically every minute of the day. Every moment I see something that kind of inspires me. But the feeling of being in control of your tool is awesome, it's great. So once I have a pencil in my hand and it becomes an extension of my arm and my fingers, my imagination takes over and it becomes fluid. It becomes the perfect tool, the perfect moment to begin drawing. I've always been creative. I think I picked that up from my father, who was very creative with wood. And as an artist, I struggle for many years to realize the potential of my art, my art, whatever we want to call it. And you need to refine it on a day-to-day basis, and week by week, month by month, year by year. Finding new information that will inform you, help you navigate the complexities of art. If you're painting or sculpting, there are certain techniques and there's certain avenues you can look at. You can look at history of the art, and you can look at the history of sculpting, drawing. There's always a way of finding it, and it can be frustrating when you don't know how to find that information within you as well as externally. Each person is individual. Each person sees life differently, and how we express that through our work is a constant journey. It's a constant evolution, and you're never satisfied. You're never satisfied, because there's always a new version, a new idea. But it's not the ideas, it's the way you process them as a person, the way you turn them from an idea into a reality on paper and canvas, through a camera, through sculpture, any medium. It's how you mature to find your voice within the art that you've always wanted to do.